Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. Today, we're going to take a look at the catalog, the studio catalog of the mighty thrash Titans Slayer with Elliott Fullam from Little Punk People, Brian Slagel from Metal Blade Records, Steve Keeler from Rock Fantasy, of course, not Pete Pardo from Sea of Tranquility. So, you know how this goes, guys. We're going to start. We got 12 studio albums we're going to cover today. We're even going to include the Haunting the Chapel EP today because you got to, right? We're going to start at number 12. We're going to work our way to number 1. Today, we're going to have Brian start wherever he is in the Hollywood squares here, the metal squares. Brian, then Elliott, then Steve, then myself. So, Brian, kick it off with your number 12.
All right, I'm going to start with a story. So I used to have a place in Tampa, Florida, and I was down there quite often, and I would always hang out at the Hard Rock in Tampa, which if you haven't been there is a great place to hang out. So anyway, you know, they, like all Hard Rocks, they have guitars and whatnot, memorabilia on the walls. So there's this one guitar that said Kerry King under it, and it just did not look like a Kerry King guitar. And so, but whatever, I'm like, yeah, they probably just threw something up there and said it's Kerry King's and whatever. So we go, you know, I'm there, and you know, I'm there for I don't know how many times in, and finally it just kind of annoyed me that this guitar was listed as Kerry King because it did not look like a Kerry King guitar. It was this weird colors all over it. It looked like something that he would never play. So I took a photo of it, texted it to him. I said, "Is this really your guitar?" And he says, "Yep, it's my guitar." And I go, "What the F?" And he said, his comment was, and this is like one of the greatest comments of all time, and it kind of sums up that era of metal. The 90s were weird.
Do you remember what guitar it was? What kind of guitar it was?
It was just a regular guitar, but it was the colors where there was like blue and white and purple and all these weird colors on it. It did not look anything like Slayer or Kerry would ever play, but his comment was, and correct, the 90s were weird. So with that in mind, I picked the 90s album Diabolus in Musica as my number 12.
Very good.
All right, for my number 12, I have Diabolus in Musica. It came out in 1998. I think this is a great album, but to me, it doesn't compare to like the top Slayer albums. I just don't like the riffs that much compared to the rest. And this list was hard for me because Slayer, like I said, the top 4 was very easy for me, but all the rest was very, very hard. I had to it's hard to rank the exact perfect spot for them. So Diabolus and Musica, my number 12.
I'm next. Are you going last, Pete?
I'm going last.
You'd always go last.
I always go last.
Last week you didn't because we had a guest.
That's true.
We're going 3 for 3. I got that 1998 album that to me is Diabolus in Music. I haven't listened to it in years, and so I guess it's the forgettable one in the franchise for me, other than their cover album, which we weren't really ranking today, which I didn't really get into much either back in the 90s. So that is my number 12, Diabolus in Music.
4 for 4.
We got a match.
Diabolus in Musica.
And he's weird.
Yeah, not a very inspired album in my opinion.
The 90s.
I know that Ben agree with that as well.
And back to Kerry's guitar, the reason why it's sitting up there in the rock is the reason why. Because if he really liked that guitar, it'd be sitting in his house, I'm sure.
Right. That was an easy one to give away. At number 11, I have Christ Illusion.
All right.
My number 11, I have God Hates Us All, 2001, released on 9/11. The song Disciple is one of my favorite songs. Disciple, I said that wrong. The song Disciple is, I feel like, one of their best songs. But I don't think the rest of the album is as good as that song.
Ooh. Steve, what do you got?
My number 11 is The World Painted Blood. I thought it was a pretty strong album, but that's where it's ending up on my list. The self-titled song is probably the song I think of the most when I think of that album, and I think that was one they still played in some of their live sets too. Wasn't sure if they were doing anything from that album on the last tour, which I saw a boatload of times, their final tour.
Cool. My number 11 is Repentless from 2015.
Interesting.
Yeah, you know, the last handful of albums for me all sound very similar. Not a huge fan of the latter part of the catalog. Some good tunes on there, obviously, but I just think on the whole, it doesn't do a hell of a lot for me.
Interesting. Well, we may disagree on that later. My number 10 album is the aforementioned World Painted Blood. There is, however, one song on there that is, I think, an exceptional song, especially live. The song Snuff. It's good on the record. You see it live, the twin leads between Carrie and Gary Holtz, and for a little while, Pat O'Brien from Cannibal Corpse when he was out with them live. Really spectacular. So I would recommend Slayer fans, if you haven't really paid attention to that song, go on YouTube. I'm sure there's a bunch of live stuff up there. But World Painted Blood, number 10.
Okay, for my number 10 is Repentless. Came out in 2015. The first time I saw them live, they opened up with the song Repentless, so it has a little extra sentimental value to me. Repentless is my highlights for this song, for this album is Repentless, and then also Chasing Death I love as well.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to just ditto what you just said, because my number 10 is Repentless. I thought that was a strong song. You know, a lot of people were a little down on that album. I don't mind that album too much, but I did see them a bunch on that tour. And then on the final tour, they still used some of the backdrop and stuff from the Repentless. And I thought that's a very strong song. I love that other song too. You Against You, which is the other video, is another strong one. I was actually listening to that album a night or two ago. And that's my number 10. I'm copying you, man.
I could have sworn Steve was going to see Slayer like every other day on their last two tours. Seemed like every time I turned around, Steve was at a Slayer concert.
It was the end of the road. They had great bands with them. Behemoth was on one tour. And
that's right.
Napalm Death.
My number 10, I'm copying Brian, World Painted Blood from 2009. Not a terrible album. Not a great album. Decent Slayer album.
Yeah, exactly. There are no bad Slayer albums. They're just ones that are better than the others.
Yes.
And by the way, Elliott needs more Slayer stuff. You know, can you get like a Slayer like neck place or something?
And I have the Slayer reaction figure over there too.
Yeah, no.
Pops.
All right, so number 9, I have God Hates Us All, which of course has the title track, which is a staple in their live set, and it's overall a pretty good record. But I have it at number 9.
I agree. That's a strong one.
My number 9 is Christ's Illusion. Came out in 2006. This, to me, it almost sounds like they try to go for like a Rain and Blood Part 2. I love the songs Catalyst and Jihad.
Yes. You're up to number 9 with me. This one came in lower in my list than I thought when I originally looked at this week. Divine Intervention is my number 9 album.
Wow.
Filling Fields and the self-titled song is 2 of the highlights, of course, you know, that I pulled off on that album. And another strong album. And like he just said, all Slayer albums are pretty damn good. And not, you know, it's hard to choose around with some of these.
My number 9, I'm with Elliott, Christ Illusion. I agree. I think they tried to get that kind of speed of light ferocity that they had on Rain and Blood. Works to an extent. Maybe the songs aren't quite as good, but I think it's a pretty aggressive and violent album, and I dig it. That's my number 9.
Cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. So my number 8 is Divine Intervention, and this is kind of, I think we're all kind of in the same boat with these 8 through 12 albums. These are kind of the albums I think everybody's basically picking, the kind of the good Slayer albums, but not the great Slayer albums. But then once we make it into the top 7, for me, all of those records are truly classic metal records and kind of make them the legends that they are. So number 8, Divine Intervention.
Great.
My number 8, I have The Haunting, the Chapel EP. Came out in 1984. I knew there was going to be a little bit, but the only thing is that to me, it's an EP. It's very raw.
Can I mute him now?
What? I couldn't.
But one of the best EPs ever.
I agree. But
that's an EP. I agree with him.
Maybe I should put it a little higher. Maybe I should put it a little higher.
But Elliott, what you got to understand is when we were all like your age or around that was like must hear for. I mean, we were all listening to Haunting the Chapel when we were a lot younger. So
see, normally I like when Elliott's on here because he has a much different perspective of all those old guys, but he might be wrong in this case. But it's okay.
I know. I maybe I should have put this a little higher, but to me, I'd rather listen to a longer album.
Yeah, you got to be honest with the way you feel about it. That's absolutely correct.
That's why we do the show. Remember, this one guy that's on this show didn't like Paul Baloff a couple episodes ago, if you remember. That wasn't Elliott.
I guess I'm never living that one down, right?
All righty. So we're at number 8 for me.
Yep.
I lost track because we got so distracted there. I'm with Christ Illusion. I think that's one we talked about a lot. Now, one of my friends was writing on a Facebook post a few days ago, like, this is like the best Slayer album. I said, really? And I don't think it's the best album, but I listened to it a couple times this week while I was exercising. I really liked the song Conspiracy. I also like Skeleton Christ off that album. I came in a little bit higher than I thought it would on my list. But it was a kind of an overlooked album, I think, right now. I think it's like, well, people kind of forget some of those past.
It was 2006 too, so.
Yep.
My number 8, God Hates Us All. 2001. I think God Hates Us All was a pretty important album because it showed that like true metal was still here amidst all the new metal that was coming out. And quite frankly, God Hates Us All was like almost like a breath of fresh air amidst all the Korn stuff and everything else, Limp Bizkit and whatever that was out there. So pretty extreme album for them too. I thought, title track is classic, obviously. So back to Brian.
Number 7. So this is where I tend to disagree a lot with Pete lately, but it's okay. But I think I have a reason for this. So number 7, I have Repentless, which was obviously their last studio record, which I think is really good. It was a return to form, I think, to the early Slayer years. It had that kind of feel to it. And I was also in the studio quite a bit when they were making that record. I was around Kerr when he was writing the record, and he was definitely in the mode of trying to go back and using the same sort of guitar tones, song structures, those sort of things as the early Slayer. And I think they did a pretty good job on that. Just the energy I thought on that record was pretty good. So number 7, I have Repentance.
Cool.
For my number 7, I have Divine Intervention. Came out in 1994. It's fast, as Paul Bostaph on drums. I love the song 213 because of the clean chorus and heavy riffs. Like I said in the past, I love it when bands do this with their songs, when they have the clean and then they go into the distortion. I also love Sex, Murder, Art, Serenity, and Murder, Circle of Beliefs. It's got a pretty nice production as well. I like this album. My number 7.
My number 7 is something that one of us just talked about with God Hates Us All. The title track's great. The Disciple, Bloodline was one of my tracks on there. I think they did a video with Bloodline, actually. And that's my number 7. It's a strong album from the catalog.
My number 7, South of Heaven.
He's always got one that you're just like, what the hell?
Okay. What? Okay.
Well, when this album first came out for me, this was a massive disappointment when this album first came out, because to follow Rain and Blood with this, I was like, it's good. And I still like this album a lot. In fact, I like it more now than I did back in the day. I think this is Slayer doing something a little bit different. I dig it. I know 7 may seem like it's really low in the catalog, but I mean, everything else I'm looking at here is like, pretty damn good. So I don't know. I think this is a damn strong record. It's different. It's kind of doomy. It's a little more melodic, but it's really good. Could it have been higher? Maybe, but I look at everything else that's sitting up on my list, and I think it's placed perfectly. I dig it.
I guess it is somewhat difficult to rank these once you get up to this point. So
it is, right? Yeah, it is. I think South of Heaven is a really different album in their catalog.
Yeah,
but it's a really good one.
All right, interesting. At number 6, I have Haunting the Chapel / Live Undead. I know we're not supposed to put live things in there, but we did a reissue, and I think for the most part, those 2 records exist as one now, more or less.
They do.
So, Haunting the Chapel at number 6.
All right.
For my number 6, I have Show No Mercy, classic and raw. Black Magic is one of my favorite songs in general. I also love the Antichrist too. it would have been really cool to see them during this time live perform this album.
It was good.
I wish I was there.
You need a time machine there, Elliot. We all need a time machine right now. I could go back at least even a year. I'll be happy with right now.
5 months.
5 months, yeah. Well, give us a year or two so we know, we got a little fun before what's coming again. All right, we're up to my number 6 now, correct? My number 6 is, I brought props. Woohoo, I got them from the store this morning. Behind the Crooked Cross, Mandatory Suicide. We were the ones that strike out for me off this album, and Ghosts of War, and the Dissident Aggressor, the Judas Priest cover, which is amazing. It's an amazing Priest song, and it's amazing by Slayer too.
It is. My number 6, Divine Intervention, 1994. I thought kind of, again, taking myself back to then, I think South of Heaven and Season of the Abyss were a little bit different. And then they came back with Divine Intervention, which I think was back to basic Slayer. And it's still a really solid record that I think holds up well for me. But all 3 of those albums, really, really solid.
Yeah, definitely.
Top 5. So my number 5, this record, I kind of had forgotten how good this record was for a while. I hadn't listened to it for quite some time for some reason. And I saw them live and they were playing a lot from it. So I went back and revisited it and realized how amazing the record actually is. It's like, oh, that's right. There's like 7 or 8 really amazing songs on there. Seasons in the Abyss, number 5.
Okay. All right. Number 5 is World Painted Blood for me, 2009. This came out. Got good production, Lombardo on drums. I absolutely love the main riff and Hate Worldwide. I don't know why. I just love that riff. One of my favorite riffs in Slayer. All around good album. Also love I can't say that word for some reason. It's Psychopathy Red. Psychopathy Red. I don't know why I can't say that word. I'm so sorry.
It's an odd one.
Number 5 for me is the Seasons of the Abyss. So I'm matching up with Mr. Slagel for that one. And a couple of my, of course, War Ensemble, Born on Fire. 2 of the strongest songs in the Slayer catalog live on this album, I believe. Copycat.
Brian's absolutely right. I mean, there's like so many like mandatory tracks on here, and it's like I was just thinking, how many times you see Slayer and they play War Ensemble, and you're like, oh, such a great live track. Blood Red, Spirit and Black, Dead Skin Mask. I mean, a lot of good stuff on that album. Really, really strong Slayer album.
All right, number 4. So number 4, I have it Where It All Began, Show No Mercy, number 4. And, a lot of people ask, what did you realize what was going on then? And I have to admit, I produced a lot of records back in the early days. I was never a producer. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I did produce a lot of records that did pretty well. But that was one record, though, where being in the studio with those guys, you just felt like something magical was happening. Because what they were doing at that age, we're all really young, was just really mind-blowing. But the craziest thing about that record, it's a bit of a famous story now, but I'll retell it anyway. We couldn't record the drums with cymbals because we had a very, very limited budget, and we were in a very small studio. And when Dave was playing, he was hitting the cymbals so hard, it was just bleeding into all the other mics, so you couldn't get a handle on the cymbal sound. Wow. So the engineer decided to do it without cymbals, which is the strangest thing, seeing a drummer play without cymbals. But even weirder than that was watching him dub the cymbals later, and he'd be sitting there and he'd be waiting, like, hitting it. And I'll never forget that image of him doing that. But I think the greatest drummer in metal of all time is David Pardo. He might have been the only one that was able to do that and make it sound amazing. So anyway, number 4 is Show No Mercy.
Awesome.
My number 4 is Hell Awaits. Came out in 1985. River sounds like you're in hell. The production overall sounds like you're in hell. And I have it right here, signed. This used to be my favorite for a while. But I would say this is my second favorite production out of all the albums. Hell Awaits, one of my favorite songs. Love the beginning of that song. Slayer. It gets me in the mood for, like, yes, I'm ready to listen to Slayer when I hear that. And then I also like Necrophiliac and Kill Again.
Okay, what am I up to here?
4.
I'm up at number 4. I thought so. I said, man, didn't I just talk about that one? Number 4, I'm coming in with the EP, Haunting the Chapel, which I'll agree with him is now the double with the Live Undead. Not a double, but that's how you buy it and purchase it now. And that's how it is even on Spotify. First, Chemical Warfare. What more do you need to say about that record, you know?
My number 4, I'm going to copy Steve again. I mean, Chemical Warfare is a top 5 Slayer track for me. Haunting the Chapel, Captor of Sin. I mean, you know,
Captor of Sin, yes.
Classic.
I actually we got my Walking Dead pinball machine in my store, and we added Slayer tunes to it. I had a guy that did it, and so it's like a Walking Dead Slayer soundtrack pinball machine. It's out at one of the doctor's house right now, but hopefully get things back to normal. We'll get it back and put it in the store.
There you go.
That's my Slayer story.
Number 3, I have South of Heaven. Now, unlike Pete, I really love this record. I'm a big fan of the one thing that I think is great about Slayer is they can go both ways. They can be the fastest band in the world, but they can also write songs that have depth and all sorts of different feels to it. And I love South of Heaven because of that. And, you know, I remember when it came out, there was definitely, I mean, first of all, how do you follow up Rain and Blood? It's like almost basically impossible. You can't. But I think they did a very good job and they kind of did this constantly in their career, trying to do something a little bit different than what the last record was. And just even though they sound the same and the formula is the same, it's a little bit different. And I put it at number 3 also because it contains my favorite Slayer song ever, which is the title track. So number 3, South of Heaven. That riff is ridiculous.
Title track is epic. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, for my number 3, I have Rain and Blood. Came out in 1986. Thrashy, fast. This was the first Slayer album that my dad actually got, and he said that this is his number 1. I love Rain and Blood. I love Postmortem, Angel of Death. It's a classic.
Cool.
It's funny, the Haunting the Chapel EP is almost as long as Rain and Blood.
Right?
That's crazy.
All right, Steve, what do you got?
I am at number 3, and I am going with Hello 8. Could be number 1 some days, but it's number 3 today. Kill Again. I Don't Sleep. Who am I? I'm trying to give 2 tracks from each. I know we got 4 of us on, and you can't go really in depth, but those are my 2 highlights from that. And what a great album. I still sell tons of albums of that in my store. People still come in and buy it, and I sell a lot of the T-shirts also. With that Hello 8's print still out, they're still making them.
My number 3 is also Hello 8's. Great album. This album scared the shit out of me the first time I heard it. It was a weird time, you know. It's like you get albums by Slayer and Venom and like and Merciful Fate, and you're like, man, there's some evil stuff going on in the heavy metal world right now, right? But before you knew it, so many other bands were doing a similar type thing. But yeah, this is a great album. I think the production is perfect for the style of the songs. Yep. It needed to be murky, just like it is, and you know, Kill Again, the title track, Crypts of Eternity. So many killer songs on here. I dig it.
All right, number 2. Number 2, I have what many people's number 1 probably is Rain and Blood. Clearly the greatest speed thrash metal record of all time. Super fast. I believe it started out at 32 minutes and ended up at 29 minutes because they played it so fast in the studio. But yeah, I mean, just from beginning to end, it's just a constant smashing of the head. And I remember when it came out, when I first heard it, I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. Number 2, Rain.
My number 2 is South of Heaven. Came out in 1988. I was debating whether or not I should put Rain and Blood here. If I could tie Rain and Blood and South of Heaven at this spot, I 100% would. Love the artwork, love the imagery, love the lyrics. And the thing that I love a lot about Slayer, the music is amazing, but the imagery and the artwork is amazing all at the same time. This has my favorite album cover. Love the title track. Like Brian Slagel said, it's one of his favorite songs of all time. It's one of my favorite songs of all time, too.
Mm-hmm. And number 2 for me is The Rain and Blood of a Lacerated Sky. And of course, Angel of Death, Altar Sacrifice, two of the tracks off of there that I dig. I got to see that Rain and Blood tour when it first came out. Then I went and saw, like, it was an Ozfest year where they were doing Rain and Blood in its entirety. I can't remember what year it was. And I remember seeing them at the Glens Falls Civic Center because Teddy Etol booked like the Aggressive Music Fest that weekend. And he kind of pulled an off date from Ozfest. And he had one day that were bands he kind of brought in. And the other day was like the Ozfest bands, and Slayer headline. And that was one of my fond memories with Slayer, seeing them at the Glen Falls Civic Center on that off-day tour and staying in Lake George. And it was a good time.
Steve,
Well,
did you?
I was pretty much just watching Lombardo, like just watching him work that kit. It was great time.
Steve, were you at that Chance show that they played on the Rain and Blood tour right at the very beginning? That was absolutely insane.
I probably was, and it was probably too crowded to enjoy.
It was insane, absolutely insane.
I was there, I'm sure.
And then, like a few months later, as the album started, getting bigger and selling more, they headlined at the Madison Square Garden Felt Forum with Danzig opening up, and that was ridiculous. That was crazy. I remember getting off the train because I was living in Long Island at the time. Getting off the train at Penn Station, walking up ground into the streets, and there were like hundreds of cops like everywhere. Like they were anticipating like some heavy shit going down. And it was a great, great concert. But yeah, you knew then that Slayer had arrived big time. So my number 2 is also Rain and Blood. Could have been my number 1. I think if you would have asked, if we would have done this show like 20, 30 years ago, it would have been my number 1. My number 1 has kind of changed since then. But yeah, some of my favorite Slayer songs are on here. Like Postmortem, Jesus Saves, Angel of Death, so many great ones. Title track. It's a great album. Production is great. It's just huge in your face. Yeah. Classic thrash album. All right, number 1. Brian, what do you got?
1. So my number 1 has kind of been my number 1 all along. Hell Awaits. A little biased because I was there and produced it. But to me, that's the quintessential Slayer record because they were really coming into their own as musicians at that point and becoming mature musicians and doing things that we were doing. We were ripping off a lot of Judas Priest and sort of production values. If you listen to the little panning things and stuff, there's a lot of, hey, Judas Priest did that. Let's rip them off and do it on this record. But I like it because you've got the super fast stuff, the slow, heavy riffs, the epic long songs. So I think that's my perfect Slayer record. And a couple of funny notes on it is obviously we did the everybody's talking about, everything being reversed and listening to things backwards. So we did the whole Join Us thing, which back in the day took forever because we had to do it on 2-inch reels and redo it. Like took like a whole day just to do that. And one of the engineers who was on that record that actually really helped us to get a better sound was Ron Fair, who was the A&R director at Chrysalis, who signed Armored Saint, and then famously went on to sign and produce the first 3 Christina Aguilera records.
Oh, boy.
And he would tell me that when he first met her, they were talking about stuff, and he said, yeah, I produced Slayer, Hell Awaits. She's like, oh my God, kind of freaked her out. But number 1, Hell Awaits.
My number 1 is Seasons in the Abyss. Came out in 1990. To me, every song on this album is just incredible. I think it has the best riffs. Tom Araya is incredible as always. My favorite production. I love the song Blood Red. I remember seeing them live. And of course, there was mosh pits going on throughout the show. But once that riff hit, the adrenaline levels pumped up 2 times. It was insane. Love War Ensemble and Dead Skin Masks. Those are the highlights, but like I said, I love the entirety of this album.
And my number 1 is, it may not be the most produced album or whatever you're going to say, it's earlier sound, and it's great. And
we had $3,000 to make it. We did the best we could.
It's Show No Mercy. And how do you go against Die with a Sword, Fight Till Death, Metal Storm, Black Magic, Final Command? It's what like we saw there whenever we saw him coming on tour, it's like, what are they playing off Show No Mercy? It's like, oh shit, they're doing Black Magic. It's like
So a quick funny story about that too. So they played the next to last show at the Forum, and I never asked for the set list, but Kerry told me they're going to switch up the set list. So I said, I'm not going to ask you. He said, I'm not going to tell you. I said, all right. So they come out and they played 4 songs off Show No Mercy. And I thought for a minute, I thought they were going to play the whole record. I was like freaking out. So that was pretty awesome though, for them to kind of end and by playing a lot of the stuff from where they began. I thought that was cool.
My buddy Chris Alla flew out to that show. He's on a Pete show sometimes, actually. Yep.
Best $3,000 you ever spent.
I didn't spend it. Tom's
Well,
dad.
whoever spent it, it was well done. Yeah, like I said before, if you would have asked me this a couple decades ago, I would have said Rain and Blood, but I have grown to just absolutely adore this album. I always liked it a lot. To me, this is almost like their new wave of British heavy metal style album. You know, I liken a lot of this album to like those first two Iron Maiden albums. It's got some really cool, complex riffs. The production is different. There's a intensity of this album that I really love. And even though it's kind of like a Slayer in their infancy, there's a charm about that I really like. And some of my favorite Slayer tunes are on here. I mean, you know, Die by the Sword, Black Magic, Antichrist, Fight Till Death, Tormentor, Cryonics. I mean, just, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. So that has overtaken Rain and Blood as my favorite Slayer album of the last kind of 5-10 years or so.
I like it.
There you go.
We're running out of time again.
We're running out of time. Cool. Well, we're right up to the minute.
This. I still have some left. The Glow in the Dark, Slayer, Show No Mercy, Minotaur. Fantasy.com. Come check them out.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, where did they go?
Murder at the Front Row did all those things.
Very cool.
Oh, yeah?
Which is, if you haven't seen it, it's a great movie and features a lot of Slayer in it as well. Murder at the Front Row. It's about the Bay Area thrash scenes, a lot of Metallica, Slayer, Exodus stuff. Really well done movie.
I have to watch that still. I haven't. I actually have the Blacklight poster in this room. It's in a frame. I just got that recently.
It's great. I'm in it. So
Love the movie.
Cool.
I love it.
That's really good.
Well, thanks, guys. This was fun, as always. So thanks again to Brian and Elliott and Steve. I am Pete Pardo. Visit us on the web at www.seeattranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. This same foursome will be back in 2 weeks to rank the studio catalog of Voivod, the great Canadian avant-garde thrash band, whatever you want to call them. We'll be doing that in 2 weeks. So stay tuned for that. For everybody, have a good rest of the weekend. Take care.